Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Sunday, April 4th, 2021, and today we're going to be taking a look at 20 years of history in the United States Senate and pretty much just be looking at the change in composition every 2 years and how that affected the overall congressional standpoint between the Democrats and the Republicans. Now, the reason why I'm doing this is because ahead of the 2022 midterm elections, we probably won't reach a 50-50 tie again. 20 years ago, in the year 2000, we saw a 50-50 tie as well, and 20 years later, we're right back there. It's a full circle moment, and I think that it's just interesting enough that we can go ahead and look through the change in coalitions, the change in outreach, and the change in party composition state by state, because it does hold some very interesting results about where Republicans used to have strong numbers versus where Democrats used to have strong numbers. And you know, the reason why I'm doing this also is because this website, map.jacksonjude.com, it's in the description box, I believe. It might not be, so I'll put it in the comment section down below. But they just introduced this new Senate tool, and I think that it's very interesting. You know, this is the first time I've actually seen it. Well, I saw it yesterday, but I didn't use it until today. And I noticed that it was very interesting, and there's a lot you can do with it. So it doesn't actually have the compare tool just yet. I'm not entirely sure as to why it's not there. Maybe it's just, you know, something that will be added in the future. But for right now, we don't even need it, right? Okay, so we're just going to be looking at the change in composition. There are a number of settings here that we can actually adjust with. So it'll show you pretty much the current seats in that position. It'll do it in terms of a pie chart, seat arrangement by, I guess, class. Really, I'm just going to go ahead and go through it and pretty much just show you what the composition looked like over the past 20 years in each individual state and in each individual election. Roughly every 2 years, there are 33 to 35 seats up, depending on special elections or just the type of year that it is. So roughly one-third of the seats. One-third of the seats are always up every 2 years. So we'll start off with the year 2000. This is the year where we had a 50-50 tie in the United States Senate. It ultimately came down to a point in June of 2021, if you just watched my Joe Manchin video recently, where a Republican actually switched to an independent and caucused with the Democratic Party. And, you know, that was something that was actually in Vermont. Jim Jeffords won by 40 points in 2000, and then 6 months later, removed himself from the GOP. But let's take a look, and let's look at some interesting results in the 2000 election and move forward. We're going to go through them pretty quickly. We're not going to spend too much time worrying about each individual state. I'm just going to point out some interesting ones. Well, first things first, I would like to compare it to where we stand on the 2020 Senate map. This is not the same Senate map that is up in 2000. The Senate map that is up in 2000 is the one in 2002. So that's the next map, and we'll just look at a little bit of comparisons there. But what you might notice is that Nevada and Arizona are absolutely very solid for the GOP. No sense of competitive nature in those states. New Mexico, the same thing. Texas, the same thing. Florida was decided by 5 points. This is Bill Nelson here. I think Bill Nelson. I can't believe I don't remember. It might be Ben Nelson, actually. I think Ben Nelson was Nebraska, and then Bill Nelson was, yes, Bill Nelson was Florida. If I know I'm right about that. Yes, I know I'm right about that because I covered it for 2 years. Don't know why I don't remember. But, yeah, so that one goes 5 points for the, oh, they're in the same Senate map. Okay, but Ben Nelson wins by 2 points in Nebraska. Nebraska, yes, goes to a Democrat. Florida, of course, goes to a Republican. There's a special election in Georgia, goes to the Democratic Party. Missouri also goes to the Democrats. Washington barely goes to the Democrats. Maria Cantwell is still in the United States Senate. Montana narrowly goes to the GOP. North Dakota, very solid. A 23-point margin. Kent Conrad here. He retired in 2012, I believe. So that one was picked up by Heidi Heitkamp and then lost in 2018. But North Dakota, solid for the Democrats. Looking across this map, though, it's very interesting. West Virginia, 57.6% margin. Neighboring Ohio, 24-point margin. So looking around the entire country here, some very interesting results that we would not expect today in any type of standard. You know, New Jersey being close, Rhode Island being solid red, Vermont being solid red, Maine sort of makes sense. I think that's Olympia Snow up there. Reminds me a little bit of Susan Collins, but, you know, safe for the Republican Party up there. So very interesting results in the year 2000. But we have the same party composition, just certainly not in terms of the states that we're actually looking at. And if you look at the overall party composition, you know, 2 Republicans in Colorado, 1 Republican in Oregon, you know, 2 Republicans in Pennsylvania, 2 Republicans in Virginia. Very different from what we actually experience today. Let's get rid of that. Let's go over to 2002. 2002 was the year that I was born. This is a very interesting election result. The elections actually happened before I was born. So looking at the map here, Some very interesting ones. It reminds me a lot of the Bill Clinton map in 1996. Going up across Abe Lincoln here from Minnesota down to Louisiana, the Democratic Party seems to have a competitive nature, winning Arkansas, winning Louisiana, winning Iowa. They lost a Missouri special election by 1.1%. They lost Minnesota by 2.2%. They went on to win Minnesota in 2008. And I think they might have gone on to win Missouri. I'm not entirely sure. We'll check in 2008. But very solid Republican results in Oregon, 16.6%. Colorado, 5. New Mexico, 30. Georgia, 7. North Carolina, 9. Elizabeth Dole there, Bob Dole's wife. She was ousted in 2008. Virginia, solid. Maine, solid. Susan Collins up there. New Hampshire goes to Chris Sununu. No, not Chris Sununu. I believe that's his father. I'm not entirely sure, though, so maybe we can go ahead and click on it and see if it brings us there. Yes, or maybe it's not his father. Maybe I'm completely wrong about that. Okay, it's his brother. Interesting. I have no idea about anything before. Not no idea, but I don't know all of the politicians before 2008, so I sort of don't recognize some of the names. A lot of common names though up in the Northeast, which is kind of interesting, but not nearly as much as in Hawaii. But that's an entirely different topic. There's a whole type of interesting thing about the Hawaii political environment there. But looking at the 2002, very interesting results. Michigan, very solid for the Democrats. West Virginia, very solid. It's just very interesting to think that, South Dakota, Montana, West Virginia were all Democrat Senate seats in 2002, while Virginia, North Carolina, Georgia, New Mexico, Colorado, New Hampshire were not. Just very interesting to see how these have pretty much changed over time. 2004 was the year that George W. Bush was reelected, so looking at some of these seats, you might have to take that into consideration depending on who was winning it on the presidential level, but there was a lot more crossover support back in 2004, 2000, 96, 92, even in 2008. But then once 2012, 2016, and 2020 started hitting, we saw a lot less crossover districts and a lot less crossover states. Very few crossover states in the Senate, which I find to be very, very interesting, but also in a way unfortunate, because we rarely ever see other parties representing opposition party states. But again, obviously that's just how it is. If you're becoming a more and more polarized nation, that's really what you would expect. But still, in 2004, despite George W. Bush winning North Dakota, goes to the Democrats by a very solid margin. Colorado also went to George W. Bush. The Democrats won there. The Democrats were very solid in Indiana. They were able to hold on to Arkansas there. They lost in states such as North Carolina and Florida, which are competitive now. Alaska was pretty close. Lisa Murkowski, very close there. Kentucky was only won by 1.3%, which I think is just very interesting that Kentucky could have gone to a Democrat at that point. New Hampshire was very safe for the Republicans. Pennsylvania, Arlen Specter here. Coincidentally, he also is someone who switched political parties in 2009, giving the Democrats a 60-40 majority in the U.S. Senate. Ohio went to the Republicans by a very solid amount. Russ Feingold won in Wisconsin. He was actually ousted 6 years later, ran again 6 years later after that and lost, but he's out, and this seat actually is up. This is the same map that is up in 2022. But looking around, nothing super. I think this one closely matches what we see today, with the exception of maybe, Indiana, Arkansas, and North Dakota. All of the other results are believable. I think if you were to show me this for the 2022 Senate map, I think that it could be somewhat believable. If you were telling me it was a red wave year, I think somewhat believable, at least. 2006, a year where the Democratic Party won back control of the United States Senate. As you can see, it goes from 55 for the Republicans down to 49. So 6 seats gained for the Democratic Party. What do you notice? Solid Florida. Right? Solid Pennsylvania, solid Michigan, solid Wisconsin, solid West Virginia. Ohio, pretty solid. Missouri goes to Claire McCaskill. She holds on to this one until 2018. North Dakota, solid for the Democrats. Nebraska, very solid for the Democrats. Montana, John Tester wins this seat, wins it in 2012, and wins it in 2018 as well. Nevada, Arizona, though, still out of reach for the Democrats. They picked those up not in 2012, but in 2018. Tennessee, close, but not nearly as close as close. Much closer than it was in 2018, but people were expecting different results in 2018. So looking at our map here, the Democrats were able to do very well. They picked up a number of seats here, but the fact that, Pennsylvania was a larger margin than Maryland was, or Connecticut, or Rhode Island, I just think to be very, very interesting, to say the least. But let's move on to 2008, where the Democrats got 59-41. This was such a large majority, one of the largest we've seen in modern political history here. And this came with the Democratic Party running up the numbers across the country. Literally speaking, they were able to do so well in a number of key battleground states. They picked up Alaska. They were were able to carry Oregon. They were able to carry Minnesota. That was a pickup as well. One of the closest races we've seen. Look at that margin, 0.011%. Montana was safe. South Dakota was safe. Iowa was safe. Arkansas was safe. Arkansas actually went from having no Republican opponent in 2008 to ousting this exact incumbent in 2014. Change in coalition is very real. Change in voter sentiment is very, very real, especially in the South. Mary Landrieu lost, I believe, in 2014. Georgia goes to the Republicans. This is actually John Ossoff's seat currently. North Carolina, Kay Hagan wins here by 9 points. Virginia goes 31 points. West Virginia, 28 points. I mean, just looking at this Senate composition, the Democratic Party really ran up the numbers. They did phenomenal. They got 59 Senate seats. But keep in mind that this Senate was much more conservative in thinking than the current Senate that we're looking at, which I find to be very interesting. This Senate would not have passed the American Rescue Plan, at least with major reservations. They would not have, based off the way that many of these senators believed, because many of them were very conservative. They represented conservative states, so you can understand why they would come across as very conservative, just representing their constituents. But at the end of the day, they were still conservative Democrats and were not nearly as liberal or progressive, as someone put it, as the current Senate, which I think is very interesting because the Democrats had 9 more seats, but probably would not have been able to accomplish as much. Looking at the Senate map in 2010, the Republicans were able to gain many, many seats. What you'll notice here is that we are starting to return and start to look at our current Senate map, our current presidential election results. You know, looking at Wisconsin and Pennsylvania, if this was 2016, this closely matches what we saw in 2016, I believe, with one exception, or sorry, 2 exceptions, Illinois and New Hampshire, and then 1 exception on the Republican side, which would be West Virginia. So very few things deviating from our 2016 electoral map. This was a red wave year, not too many surprises. The only interesting thing is that California was close. Carly Fiorina came within 10 points of being a senator. Washington was close. Nevada was somewhat close with Harry Reid there. He was a very well-known name. Interesting that he had a close race, but he also comes from a swing state. Colorado was very close, 1.6%. Alaska was still close, but not with a Democrat, but rather with Joe Miller, the Republican nominee. She won a write-in campaign in Alaska. West Virginia went to Joe Manchin by 10 points. Illinois special election went to the Republicans by 1.6%. New Hampshire went to Kelly Ayotte by 23 points. She was ousted just 6 years later. Looking at 2012, this was the year where Obama was reelected. I remember Fox News saying that Obama and the Democratic Party did much better than expected in the United States Senate. And as you can see, here's why. Romney won Montana, but it went to the Democrats. Romney won North Dakota, but it went to the Democrats. Romney won Missouri, but it went to the Democrats. Romney won Indiana. Romney won West Virginia. They all went to the Democratic Party. And if you're looking at this map, the Democrats also ran up the numbers in some other states. They ran up the numbers in Florida, 13-point margin for Bill Nelson here. They were able to win Pennsylvania by 7 points, Michigan by 21, Wisconsin by 6, Maine by 21. Previously competitive states, Minnesota, Amy Klobuchar won by 35 points, very large margins, but they simply could not tap into Arizona and Nevada like they could in 2018. So looking at some of these states, this is the last time you will see them blue on a statewide level. North Dakota, Missouri, no Democratic senators after 2018, which means that this is the last time that these Democratic senators were able to win their elections. And if you're looking across the map, Nebraska went to the Republican Party. This was a flip. This is an automatic pickup for the GOP. This is the 2018 Senate map. 2014, another red wave year. I would argue this is one of the best years for the GOP in the 21st century. They got 54 Senate seats to 46 Democratic seats. If you're looking at the margin here, in a number of states, it was enough that these Republicans were able to hold on 6 years later. There were so many competitive states in 2020, yet almost all of them went to the GOP. If you're looking at this map, I don't think you should be too surprised. A few surprises maybe in Colorado, that it was a 1.9% margin, that Louisiana was, close. Kansas was also close. Iowa was moderately closer in 2020. Alaska was actually pretty close. That's because there was a Democrat incumbent here. Dan Sullivan ended up winning, and then he won re-election in 2020. North Carolina was pretty close. Kay Hagan, the incumbent who was ousted. Tom Tillis also won re-election in 2020 by roughly the same margin. So North Carolina, very much inelastic, always leans to the GOP, but is sometimes in reach for the Democrats. They do have their shining star moments. It's just not always competitive for them, and you can pretty much guess the result of North Carolina way ahead of time just looking at its history. mystery, but there are some surprises, so you never know for sure. Georgia went to David Perdue by 8 points. He ended up losing 7 years later. Maine went to Susan Collins by 36 points. Jeanne Shaheen only won by 3.2%. She went on to win her election in 2020 by a safe margin. Virginia was won by 0.81%. I'll compare that in 2020. This is the last time we saw the 2020 Senate map up, so we can actually see a direct comparison here. Not much of a difference. Not much of a difference at all. The only difference really, Colorado is blue. Georgia is blue as well. I don't think there's any other differences here at that point. No. I don't see any differences at all, which I think is very interesting, and it really goes to show that, after Obama's second term, we pretty much saw a lot of voting groups vote the same way they do on the presidential level, and that's what we see here. I don't see Arizona up, but that's because they didn't have a special election, so that makes sense. 2016, this is the map that is up in 2022. This was when President Trump won his first election, ended up with a House majority for the Republicans and a Senate majority for the Republicans as well, which means they have a trifecta. If you're looking at this map, it is pretty recent. You will be looking at this very often as we look to 2022. A few surprises here that if you were just looking at it and saying, wait a second, why are some of these states pretty close? Missouri was only won by 3 points. The fact that Wisconsin and Pennsylvania were comparable to Missouri, I think is very interesting. Wisconsin actually with a larger margin. Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Missouri being close. I think Pennsylvania and Wisconsin are expected. Missouri is a surprise. Ohio and Iowa being 20-point margins or larger is also a bit of a surprise. Marco Rubio winning in Florida by 8 points. Bill Nelson won by 8 points the last time, by 13 points, ended up losing. But looking at that, Marco Rubio probably will be pretty safe in 2022 unless there's a huge change in support from the electorate down in Florida, which I don't think is going to happen. But again, weirder things have happened in previous years. Georgia went to Johnny Isakson by 13.8%. North Carolina goes to Richard Burr by 5.7%. He's actually retiring in 2020. Yes, he voted actually to convict President Trump. I was trying to think for a second there. If any of the other senators voted to convict that are also retiring, I think Pat Toomey is one of them. I don't know if any more are retiring. I think that they're either up in 2024 or 2026. One is up in 2022. That is Lisa Murkowski. She won by 15 points in her previous election. And now that I'm thinking about it, Johnny Isakson, I think this seat actually is the seat for Kelly Loeffler. Or not Kelly Loeffler, Raphael Warnock now, Reverend Raphael Warnock. So he's actually the one who holds this seat currently, but he retired ahead of his term, and that's what prompted the special election that he ran in. And then looking at Kentucky, Indiana, closer, but not close enough. Close, but not close enough. So a little bit surprising that Kentucky and Indiana were less than safe, but you can expect them to be pretty solid for the Republicans in 2022. 2018 rolls around, and this is where we start to see the Democratic Party falter in some of these states. They're unable to win Indiana again. They're unable to win Missouri again. They're unable to win North Dakota again, and they lose Florida. However, they were able to do enough that they were able to carry West Virginia, carry Montana, carry the Trump states of Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Ohio, and they flipped 2 states, Nevada and Arizona. Both of those states were flips. Texas was a 2.6% margin. In 2012, it was a 15.8% margin for the same candidate. So very, very close in Texas relative to where it was before. Very interesting, to say the least. But the Democrats ultimately lost a net amount of 2 seats, and then 2020 rolled around and they won 2 seats. But looking at won 3 seats. But looking at our Senate map here, the Democrats were able to carry West Virginia, were able to carry Montana, but if you notice, the margins decrease in almost every single state relative to 2012 for the Democratic Party, which means the next time that this Senate map is up in 2024, the Democrats could be in for a bit of trouble and need to really build up that buffer in 2022 and potentially win maybe Texas or Florida in 2024. And then 2020, full circle, we're back to this moment here. The Democratic Party won back control of the United States Senate. And they did it by flipping 2 seats in Georgia, 1 seat in Colorado, and 1 seat in Arizona. The Republicans flipped Alabama, and if you aren't too familiar as to why Alabama had a Democratic senator in the first place, it's because in 2017, Doug Jones ran in a special election because Jeff Sessions, the incumbent senator, retired to go ahead and assume the role of Attorney General in the Trump administration. Nobody expected the race to be competitive until Roy Moore was the nominee, and then allegations of harassment came upon him, and so much more that I'm really not going to go too in depth about that. ultimately brought the state of Alabama to elect the first Democrat in 25 years. And an interesting fun fact, I mention this pretty often, the last Democrat to be elected before Doug Jones in Alabama is actually the incumbent Republican Senator Richard Shelby. So he was a party switch type guy. So Alabama flipped to the Republicans in 2020. But ultimately, this won back Democrats Senate control, and we have gone full circle. From the year 2000 to the year 2020, we've gone 50-50 to 50-50. Nothing seems to have changed in terms of overall numbers, but coalitions, ability to win in the South, ability to win in the Northeast has changed for both parties. We will no longer see solid red senators in Vermont or Rhode Island, and we will not see solid Democratic senators in Arkansas or, Louisiana. It's going to get increasingly more difficult as these regions sort of separate from their previous identities for the opposition parties. But ultimately, it still goes to show that the Democratic Party and the Republican Party still have the ability to win control of the Senate, still have the ability to win control of certain states, just that those states, as we can expect, do change over time, and that the Democratic Party's ability to win in the South seems to be long gone with a few exceptions. The same thing for the Republicans in the Northeastern region, with just a few exceptions, one of them most notably being Susan Collins. So that pretty much wraps up this video. We've gone through the past few elections in the 21st century. In fact, all of the Senate elections, some very interesting results, as you can see, changing over time. A lot of reds changing to a lot of blue, and vice versa. Very interesting with these Senate maps that are up, and it really just gives us more insight as to how some of these states have voted in the past versus how they currently vote today. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist for my 2022 Senate election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today.